I stared at the plain white envelope lying on the coffee table, almost afraid to touch it. It was unmarked, unstamped, and unaddressed, innocuous, yet heavy with unspoken meaning. Archibald had brought it by yesterday, placed it deliberately in front of me, and said in that calm, steady tone he always used, "Orson, I think you should see this." Inside was a wedding invitation. My son Ebner's wedding. A wedding I had learned about, not from my own child, but from a stranger's casual mention. The thought tightened my chest and left a bitter taste at the back of my throat. Archie had always been a rare constant in my life, one of the few people who had stayed loyal through all of life's twists, turns, and betrayals. He had managed my legal affairs for over 30 years before retiring, and somehow, inexplicably, he had stayed in touch with Sibylla and Ebner after the divorce. The invitation had come to his wife Bertha, he explained gently. She still kept in touch with a few of Sibylla's friends. He had thought I should know. Now I sat in my worn leather chair, swirling whiskey in my glass, staring at the exquisite invitation before me. The letters were inlaid with delicate gold script. Edna Hadley and Pauline Driscoll invite you to share in the joy of their marriage. The ceremony was to be held in 3 weeks at the River Valley Estate, the most extravagant wedding venue in all of New Kensington. 20-2 years. That was how long it had been since I had last seen my son. He had been a skinny, scowling teenager back then, fists clenched and jaw tight. "You never really loved us," were the last words he had spat at me before slamming the door of my new home, the home I had invited him to for dinner. He never returned. I remembered Sibylla's sobbing at the court hearing during our divorce. Her words had cut me deeper than any blade. I had been emotionally absent, she said, missing all of Ebner's school events, more devoted to my company than my family. She painted me as a heartless, cold man. She wasn't wrong. I had missed birthdays, plays, parent-teacher conferences. I had come home long after Ebner had fallen asleep and left long before he awoke, consumed with the endless demands of building a company, expanding a tiny workshop into one of the state's largest industrial equipment manufacturers. Every day had been a battle, every contract a war, every late night a step toward securing what I thought would be a better future for my family. But in doing so, I had lost the present. The family I thought I was building it for had already slipped through my fingers. By the time my company reached stability, my marriage had ended. Sibylla had taken the house, generous alimony, and, most heartbreakingly, Ebner's complete loyalty. 15 years old at the time, my son had chosen his mother over me. I had tried to stay close calls, letters, attending plays from the shadows so he wouldn't feel embarrassed, but my efforts were met with silence or polite dismissal. Gifts returned, unopened, invitations ignored. My company thrived, yet my life remained modest. Same quiet neighborhood, same old Lincoln, now 10 years old. I had never cared for luxury. My focus had always been the business, the future, and perhaps foolishly, the hope that one day my sacrifices would be understood. 3 times I tried to help Ebner financially tuition for college. A graduation car, a down payment for his first apartment. Each attempt was met with rejection. Prideful, resentful, he refused every offering. Through mutual acquaintances, I knew Ebner had become a cybersecurity specialist, a talented, intelligent man. I was proud, though from a distance Sibylla had remarried and divorced. I knew nothing about my son's fiancée other than the name printed in exquisite gold on the invitation. The whiskey in my glass had dwindled to nothing, yet I still didn't know what to do. Attend as an uninvited guest. What would that accomplish, other than more humiliation? The following day, I called Archie. "What are you planning to do?" he asked after a brief exchange of greetings. "I haven't decided yet," I admitted, "but I have an idea." "Can you find out who's organizing the wedding?" "Organizing?" Archie's voice sharpened. "Are you trying to ruin Ebner's wedding?" "No, of course not," I interrupted. "Just find out who's in charge." 2 days later, I had my answer. Theodosia, owner of a small but prestigious event management agency downtown. I arranged a meeting, posing as a family friend wishing to present a gift for the couple. Her office was in a beautifully restored historic building, bright and welcoming. She was energetic, in her 50s, with a discerning eye and a short, precise haircut. "What can I do for you, Mr. Hadley?" she asked as we sat down, tea in hand. "You've probably guessed I'm not just a friend," I began cautiously. "You're the father of the groom," she said knowingly. "Yes, a complicated relationship," I admitted. "We haven't spoken in over 20 years. She chuckled softly. "Family dramas are common in my line of work. So, what do you want?" "I want to pay for the wedding," I said simply. "The entire event," but anonymously. Her eyebrows rose. "That's unusual. A River Valley wedding isn't cheap." "Money is no object," I replied, "but there's one condition. No one can know it's from me. If anyone asks, say it's from an anonymous benefactor." She studied me silently, then nodded. "It can be arranged, but why not offer directly?" I gave a bitter smile. "He'd refuse. Ebner has refused any help from me since he was 15. He's proud and resentful. He believes I betrayed him. This is the only way I can give him a day to remember without rejection. And yet, you want to do this because I missed everything else. Childhood, adolescence, adulthood. I can't reclaim that time, but I can give him at least one perfect day. I didn't tell her my quiet hope that this act might soften Ebner's heart if he ever discovered the truth. After a long pause, Theodosia offered gentle advice. Sometimes the best gift a parent can give is simply presence. I know, I replied, but I wasn't invited. We signed the necessary contract, including the standard clause allowing cancellation before the event. Every detail, from catering to decor, was covered. The young couple will be informed that an anonymous sponsor has covered everything, she assured me. One last thing, I added. I plan to attend. From afar, Theodosia froze. Minus Mr. Hadley. Yes, I just want to see my son, unnoticed. You do realize a public scandal would be disastrous. I'll keep a low profile, I promise. Returning home, I sat in my office, pondering the decision for hours. Part of me felt relief. Another whispered doubt, was this another misguided attempt to repair a broken bond? I opened my laptop, typed Pauline Driscoll's name, and scrolled through photos and professional profiles, confident, attractive, smiling with my son in every picture. Flawless, I had hoped to find fault, a reason to disapprove, but found none. My son had grown tall and strong, like I had been. Same broad shoulders, same determined chin. For the next 2 weeks, I lived on the edge of anticipation. I rehearsed scenarios in my mind, quiet attendance, unnoticed. Discovery, scandal, joy, rejection, and always, in the background, the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, this one day could begin to heal 22 years of silence. The middle was the option in which I finally talked to Ebner, and we take the first step toward reconciliation. This option seemed the least realistic. The week before the wedding, I bought a new suit, a navy blue, conservative butyligan. My old closet consisted mostly of simple shirts and pants, suitable for the office, but not for formal occasions. I visited a barber shop where I got a haircut and tidied up my graying beard. A special occasion, the barber asked, noticing my tension. A wedding. I answered briefly. Oh, congratulations. Yours known by my sons. He nodded and asked no more questions, for which I was grateful. 3 days ago, I received a message from Theodosia. The preparations are going according to plan. The young ones are very grateful to an anonymous benefactor. Your idea for additional flower arrangements is approved. I hadn't asked for additional flowers, but apparently Theodosia did to add something special on my behalf. She turned out to be an unexpectedly tactful person. Yesterday, I received another message. The final details are settled. Wedding day, after tomorrow, at 3 p.m. Attached is a photo off the venue. Attached to the message was a picture of River Valley Estate, a grand mansion with columns drenched in flowers, a lavish wedding for the son of a man who himself shunned any luxury. The irony did not escape me. Today, on the eve of the wedding, I suddenly realized that I still hadn't decided exactly what I would do. Would I enter the ceremony hall and sit in the far corner? Or would I watch through the window? Or perhaps it would be better to wait until the reception, when it would be easier to get lost in the crowd. Izette in my office, looking at old photographs. Ebner, at 5 years old, on his first bicycle. Ebner at 10, proudly displaying a school project. Ebner at 14, a few months before our divorce. Already wary, already distant. At the time, I had written it off as adolescence. Now I realized he'd already sensed our family was falling apart. My phone rang. Archie, are you still planning to go tomorrow? He asked me without preamble. Yeah. What are you going to tell Ebner? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe he'll just watch from a distance. Orson, Archie sounded worried. I understand Yao went to see your son, but breaking into his wedding after 20 years of silence. I'm not going to break in. I countered. I'm going to be quiet and inconspicuous, discreet. You're the groom's father, and you look like an older version of Edner. Someone's bound to notice the resemblance. He was right, of course, but I've already made up my mind. I have to be there. Archie, for once in my life, I have to act like a real father. A real father respects his children's boundaries, he said softly. A real father doesn't miss his son's wedding. I countered. We were both silent for a moment, realizing we'd reached an impasse. Well, good luck then, Arcasad, finally. Call me afterward and let me know how it went. If I don't get arrested for trespassing. I tried to joke. Not funny, Orson. After talking to Archie, I couldn't calm down for a long time. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should respect Edner's choice and not show up where I wasn't invited. But the voice inside kept telling me that this was your son, your only child, and you had a right to see him on your wedding day. Toward evening, I took the suit out of the closet and hung it on the door, Tasmith out the creases. I polished the shoes, prepared my cufflinks, the only expensive item in my closet, a gift from me father for my own wedding. Silver engraved with my initials. I'd only worn them a few times in my life. At the most important moments, tomorrow was definitely one of them. The night passed adressly, I fell asleep, and woke up tormented by strange dreams in which Ebner was hugging me happily or shoving me out the door in a rage. In one dream, Sybil was laughing as the guards led me out of the hall, and in another, she was screaming and apologizing for all these years. I woke at dawn with a headache and a heaviness in my chest. I couldn't get breakfast down my throat. I drank only coffee, strong and bitter like my thoughts of the past. It was going to be a long day. The ceremony was still many hours away, and I was already on edge, like I was before an important business meeting. Only the stakes were much higher than any contract. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. New Kensington in September is especially nice. The trees are just beginning to change color. The air is fresh, but not yet cold. I walked down familiar streets, past the park where I used to walk with little Edner, past the old school where he went to grade school. Memories come in waves. This is where he fell off his bike and shattered his knee, and I carried him home in my arms. This waste playground where he climbed the tallest slide for the first time on his own. And in that cafe, we celebrated his 10th birthday, his last truly happy birthday before everything went downhill. The walk didn't bring relief. On the contrary, it made me yearn for the irrevocably lost time. I came home more determined than when I went out. Tomorrow I would see my son, and so bait. I spent the rest of the day getting my affairs in order. I went through the mail, answered a few work emails even though I had formally stepped away from the operational management of the company for 2 years, leaving myself in the position on the board of directors. I called the CFO and discussed the quarterly results. This was an attempt to distract myself to occupy my hands and head with something familiar and understandable. In the evening came the last message from Theodosia. Everything is ready. Ceremony tomorrow at 3. The weather promises to be great. I wrote back, thanks for everything. I'll be there tomorrow. Good luck, she replied after a pause. Before going to bed, I checked my suit, cufflinks, shoes. One more time. Everything was ready to go. Tomorrow, I would see Ebner for the first time in 22 years. My son would be getting married, and I would be there, uninvited but with an entrance fee equal to the entire cost of the wedding. As I fell asleep, I imagined how things might have been if I had been a different person. If I hadn't missed the school, if I'd spent more time at home, if I'd learned to listen to Sibila before it was too late, maybe then I would have gotten a real invitation to my son's wedding. Maybe then he himself would have asked me to be his best man, but there was no changing the past. I could only hope that the future could still be fixed. With this thought, I finally fell asleep, preparing for the most important day of the last 20 years of my life. The morning of the wedding day was clear and windless. I woke up before dawn, even though the ceremony was not to begin until 1500 hours. The restless sleep did not bring rest. All night long, I was haunted by fragments of memories mixed with anxiety. I stood under the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash away the tension. Then I shaved thoroughly, trying not to cut myself with trembling hands. I couldn't eat breakfast, my throat constricted at the thought of food. He only drank a cup of strong black coffee, looking out the window at the waking city. Time stretched agonizingly slowly. I checked my suit a few times, cleaned my already spotless shoes, and reread the messages from Theodosia. Around 11 o'clock, I couldn't stand it any longer, and called Archie. Are you still going? He asked instead of greeting me. Yes, I answered. I can't not go. You realize Sybil's probably going to be there, right? I swallowed. Meeting my ex-wife scared me as much as meeting my son. In 22 years, we'd only seen each other twice. At the funeral saw mutual friends, and both times we'd only nodded. I understand, but I should bear Archie's side. Okay buddy, good luck to you. Call me if you are a fan. Thing goes wrong. By 13 o'clock, I was all set. The navy blue suit fit perfectly, though I felt uncomfortable in it. Too used to casual clothes. Silver cufflinks glinted on the cuffs. At the last moment, I decided not to wear a tie. It seemed to choke me, adding to my anxiety. At the beginning of the second, I got into the car. It was about a 40-minute drive to the River Valley estate, but I wanted to arrive early, so I could look around, and perhaps find a place from which I could observe the ceremony unobtrusively. The road out of town was surprisingly clear. The old Lincoln cruised smoothly down the highway, and my thoughts drifted back to the past. I remembered the day Edner was born, how I held him, tiny and red, afraid to break him. His first steps, his first words, the school plays I was often late for or didn't show up for at all. How my son's face would change when he saw me in theaterway of the auditorium when the show was already over. First joy, then disappointment, and in the last year's bear, the divorce, just a cold statement of fact. River Valley Estate in on the horizon. A huge colonial-style mansion surrounded by a manicured park. The driveway was lined with expensive cars. The guests were already starting to arrive, even though the ceremony was over an hour away. I parked in the far corner of the parking lot, away from the main entrance. For a while, I just sat in the car, gathering my courage. Through the windshield, I watched the guests. Elegant women in flying dresses, men in strict suits. All of them looked confident and satisfied with life. Unlike me, finally, taking a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked slowly toward the mansion. As I approached the main entrance, I was overtaken by a young couple who were excitedly discussing how well everything was organized. They say there is some secret sponsor who paid for the whole wedding. The woman said, "Can you believe it?" Pauline said it was an anonymous pusher, probably some rich relative of Ebner's. Her companions adjusted. I chuckled involuntarily. If only they knew how close to the truth we were. River Valley's front entrance was a wide marble staircase leading up to massive doors. On either side of the stairs were huge vases of white roses and greenery. Above the entrance was an archway of flowers, with the initials E and P intertwined in an elegant pattern. In the spacious lobby, guests were greeted and directed by two girls in matching pale blue dresses. They were checking the list, marking the arrivals, and pointing the way to the ceremony site, a courtyard where rows of white chairs were arranged in front of a flowered archway. I slowed my step as I approached the registration table. Onuf, the girls looked up and gave me a professional smile. "Good afternoon. Your name, please?" "Orson Hadley," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Her fingers quickly ran through the list. Her smile became uncertain. "I'm sorry, but I don't see you on the guest list." "I'm the groom's father," I said quietly. The girl blinked confusedly. "One moment, please." She stepped aside and whispered something to her colleague. She too looked at the list, frowned, and shook her head. The first girl took out her phone and dialed a number, turning away from me. Stood there feeling the blood rush to my cheeks. The situation was getting awkward. A few of the guests who arrived after me were looking in my direction curiously. After a couple minutes, the girl returned, her face a look of embarrassment. "Mr. Hadley, I'm sorry, but your name is indeed not on the list. I contacted the coordinator and she said she couldn't let you through without confirmation from the bride or groom." "I understand." I nodded. "Can I speak to my son? Edna is getting ready for the ceremony right now," she faltered. "But I can take a message." At that moment, Theodosia apprentice appeared from a side quarter. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then walked toward us with determination. "What's the problem, Leela?" she asked her assistant. "Ah, this gentleman claims Tobe, the groom's father, but he's not on the list," she replied. Theodosia turned to me. There was a warning in her eyes. "Mr. Hadley," she said formally. "I remember our meeting, but I cannot allow you to attend the ceremony without an invitation." "I understand," I said, "but it's very important that I see my son today." She lowered her voice. "We agreed that you would remain an anonymous benefactor. Your appearance here could cause complications. I just want to be quietly present," I insisted. "No one will even notice me." Theodosia clearly hesitated. At that moment, a woman's voice came from the corridor leading to the courtyard. "Theodosia, have you seen my mother?" "She must have." The voice broke off as its owner entered the hallway and saw us. It was she, Pauline Driscoll, my son's fiancée. She looked even more spectacular in person than she did in the pictures. Tall, slender, with perfect posture and cold blue eyes. Her wedding dress was a work of art, dainty in the front with an intricate lace train. "What's going on?" she asked, looking at me appraisingly. "Miss Driscoll," Theodosia began. "This gentleman, I'm Edna's father," I interrupted, stepping forward. "Orson Hadley." Pauline froze. Her gaze slid down my face, lingered on my eyes, the same eyes as her fiancé's, and then dropped to my suit. I was suddenly acutely aware that despite its quality, it looked modest compared to the expensive outfits of the other guests. "Ebner's father," she repeated slowly. "Interesting. Ebner had said his father had died years ago. It was like a kick in the butt. So to my son, I was dead. It's easier to cut me out of his life completely than to explain a complicated relationship. As you can see, I'm Quidilov," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "And you decided to show up today uninvited." There was irritation in her tone. "What do you want?" "Just to see my son on his wedding day." Pauline crossed her arms over her chest. "Look, Mr. Hadley, I didn't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is a special day for me and Ebner, and I'm not going to let you ruin it." "I'm not going to ruin anything," I assured him. "I'm going to sit quietly in the far corner. You're not on the guest list." She cut me off. "Then you're not invited." Edner made it clear who he wanted to see tonight, and whoa, he didn't. By now, our conversation had attracted the attention of other guests. Several people stopped nearby to watch the scene unfold. "Pauline, maybe we should ask Edner," Theodosia suggested quietly. "This is his father after all." "If that man really is his father." Pauline gave me a look of doubt. "He looks more like some beggar who heard about the wedding and decided to sneak into the reception." "How did you even find out about today's event?" "From a mutual acquaintance," I answered evasively. "See," Pauline turned to Theodosia. "He can't even give me a name." "Archibald Whitaker," I said, "a friend of mine and a former lawyer. His wife Bertha got the invitation." "The old Whitaker men?" Pauline frowned. They're friends of Ebner's mother, not his. Sybil and I were married for 15 years, he reminded her. We had mutual friends. A flicker of doubt flashed across Pauline's face, but she got over it quickly. It doesn't matter. The fact remains that you're not on the guest list. You're not invited. I'm asking you to leave. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Who was she to keep me out of Mion's son's wedding? But I restrained myself, realizing that a scandal would only hurt. I just want to congratulate me, son, I said. 5 minutes, no more. If Ebner wanted to congratulate you, he would have invited you, Pauline Perry. But he didn't. What does that tell you? That we have a complicated relationship, I admitted. But today is a special day, and a special day that you're trying to ruin by showing up, she interrupted. Theodosia, would you please escort this gentleman to the exit and warn the guards to keep him back? Theodosia looked uncomfortable. Pauline should still know, the bride said. I'm not going to let some stranger claiming to be Ebner's father ruin our day. She turned to me. Leave now, or I'll call security. By now, a small group of guests had gathered in the lobby, watching with interest. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, sympathetic, judgmental. I stood there, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to insist, to demand to see my son. The other part realized that a scandal at the wedding was the last thing I wanted. I'd come to congratulate Ebner, not ruin his day. You don't belong here, Payne continued, seeing my hesitation. You're not invited, and I'm not going to bother Ebner for some imposter. An imposter, I echoed, feeling my cheeks start to burn. Exactly, she nodded. If you really are his father, why doesn't he ever talk about you? Why did he tell me you were it? Why didn't he invite me to the wedding? Her words were like slaps, one after another. But most painful of all, there was some truth to them. To Ebner, I really was dead. It was my own fault. Miss Driscoll, Theodosia interposed. Mr. Hadley. Really, not now, Theodosia, Pauline cut off. I'm not going to let some spoil our wedding. That word hit me the hardest. I looked at my suit, a nice suit, but not luxurious. At my hands, workmanlike, calloused from the tools I'd once used to create my production. At my cufflinks, the only expensive thing I wore today. In this woman's eyes, I was just trying to sneak into someone else's party. I'm not a said quietly. I am Ebner's father, and I have a right to see my son on his wedding day. Leave, Pauline repeated. Or you'll call security. I realized I was losing this battle. The longer I stayed, the greater the risk of a real scandal breaking out. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to ruin Ebner's wedding day. Okay, I nodded. I'll leave, but please tell my son that I came by and that I'm proud of him. I will, Pauline said with a fake smile that made it clear she wasn't going to pass anything on. I turned to leave, feeling the stares of the guests on me. Embarrassment and humiliation burned me. I took a few steps toward the exit when I heard Pauline's voice behind me. And don't come back. No one else waiting for you here. I walked slowly back to my car, feeling the humiliation turn into a burning mixture of resentment and anger. Each step along the gravel path sent a throbbing in my temples. The bitterness inside me grew stronger with each meter away from the mansion. The word echoed in my head. I, the man who had built a successful company from scratch, employed hundreds of people, paid for this very wedding, was unworthy to attend my own son's celebration. When I reached the car, I sank heavily into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I reached for the keys. I needed to calm down, gather my thoughts. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes, trying to breathe more evenly. In 22 years, I'd gotten used to the idea that Ebner didn't want to see me. I'd resigned myself to the role of absent father, though I tried to re-establish contact from time to time. But to hear that I was dead to my son, that it was easier for him to think of me as dead than just a bad father, it was too painful. And that woman, Pauline, her scornful gazeous in my suit, her haughty tone when she spoke of my rights, she didn't know the whole story, but she had already passed judgment. Suddenly, he remembered my contract with Theodosia, the clause that gave me the right to cancel payment at any time before XMD of the event. Originally, it had been a standard legal technicality, an insurance policy in case the wedding was canceled, but now I pulled out my phone and found Theodosia's number. My finger hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to just go home. Forget this humiliating experience. Let Ebner enjoy wedding day, even if I wasn't there. But the other part, hurt and angry, demanded justice. I pressed the call button. Minus Mr. Hadley. Theodosia's voice sounded tense. Yes, it's me. I am trying to keep my voice steady. I have a question about our contract. I'm listening to you. Her tone was wary. The clause about canceling payments, is it still valid? There was a short pause. Yes, she finally answered. Until the event is over, you have the right to cancel payment. But Mr. Hadley, I strongly advise you to consider. I've already thought about it, I interrupted. I want to exercise that right. Cancel all payments immediately. Minus Mr. Hadley, she said in a pleading tone. Please, let's discuss this. I understand that you're upset about your conversation with Miss Driscoll, but upset. I grinned bitterly. That's an understatement. I've been made to look like a from my son's own wedding, a wedding I paid for. Pauline didn't know you were a sponsor. Theodosia reminded me. You asked me to keep it a secret, and now I'm asking you to cancel payment, I said firmly. It is my right under the contract. Theodosia took a deep breath. Technically, yes, but think of the consequences. Everything is ready. The guests have gathered. The ceremony is about to begin. It would bested their feeling the blood rush to my cheeks. The situation was getting awkward. A few of the guests who arrived after me were looking in my direction curiously at a disaster for whom I asked. For Pauline, who just humiliated me in front of a dozen guests. Or for my son, who prefers to think of me as dead. For our very own, she said softly, including you, Mr. Hadley. Such an act would unlearn force Edna's opinion that you were not a man he could be proud of. Her words were like a cold shower. She was right. Canceling the payment now, sabotaging the wedding because of wounded pride. It would only confirm everything Ebner had thought of me, all this years. That I was a selfish man who put my own interest before the welfare of my family. Minus Mr. Hadley, Theodosia called after a long pause. Are you still there? Yeah, I answered. I must think about it. Of course, she sounded relieved. Take some time to think it over, but remember, some decisions can't be undone. I ended the call and put the phone on the seat next to me. Then I started the car and slowly pulled out of the parking lot. I needed to drive around, get my thoughts in order. I drove down the winding road that surrounded the River Valley estate with no particular goal in mind. Just to move, not to sit. Still, thoughts swirled around in my head like fall leaves in the wind. 15 minutes later, I found myself making a full circle and approaching the mansion again. I parked on a small observation deck that overlooked the backyard of the mansion. From here, I had a good view of the ceremony site, rows of white chairs, a flower arch, musicians tuning their instruments. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Theodosia's number again. Yes, Mr. Hadley, I've made my decision, I said. I'm canceling the payment. But I'm canceling the payment, I repeated, and replacing it with a new payment on my card right now. Yeah, I don't understand. She was confused. It's simple, I explained. Hannah, I want you to cancel the anonymous payment and publicly announce that there was a problem with funding. And then in a few minutes announce that there is a new me, Orson Hadley, the father of the groom, and I'm taking over all expenses. That's up, it's rather dramatic. Theodosia said cautiously. Exactly. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I want Pauline to realize who she called a. I want Ebner to know that his dead father had paid for feuding with his own labor, not just showed up as an uninvited guest. It would create a scene, Theodosia warned. A scandal, perhaps, I know. I said, I'm tired of being invisible in my own son's life. If the only way to get him to see me is to make a scene, so be it. Theodosia was silent for a while. Very well, she said at last. I will do as you ask, but I must warn you that the consequences may be unpredictable. I'm prepared for that, I replied. When can you make the announcement? Everyone's going to the ceremony now. I can do it right before it starts in about 20 minutes. Great, I said. I'll be there. You're going back? I could hear the surprise in her voice. Yes, I want to see Pauline's face when she realizes that she has driven away the man who paid for the whole wedding. Minus Mr. Hadley, Theodosia began, but interrupted. I knew I was acting impulsively, perhaps even petulantly. But after 22 years of silence and rejection, something inside me had broken. I no longer wanted to be invisible, a ghost to be brushed aside. I wanted Ebner to see me. Let him be angry, let him hate me more, but at least acknowledge my existence. Started the car again and drove back to the mansion. This time, I parked closer to the main entrance. The guests were still arriving, many of them already heading toward the garden ceremony site. I got out of the car and walked slowly towards the entrance, preparing for my second attempt. This time, I didn't stop at the front desk. I walked confidently past the confused female coordinators and headed straight into the courtyard. No one tried to stop me. Perhaps they remembered the recent incident and didn't want a repeat of the scene. I took a seat in the last row on the edge. I had a good view, but I didn't attract much attention. A few guests looked curiously in my direction, but no any. Apparently, the news of the strange man claiming to be the groom's father had not yet spread widely. The musicians played a light tune, creating an atmosphere of anticipation. Guests chatted, laughed, took their seats. Everything looked perfect. The flowers, the decorations, the smiling faces, and it was all thanks to me, a man who was not allowed to attend his own paid wedding. A few minutes later, I noticed movement at the entrance to the mansion. Theodosia stepped out onto the small platform where the microphone was set up. Her face looked tense, but professional. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, please have your attention for a moment. The conversations died down, all eyes turned to her. Unfortunately, we have had some financial difficulties, Theodosia continued. The anonymous sponsor who had paid for tonight's gala had withdrawn his support. A whisper of surprise and concern swept through the rows of guests. This means, Theodosia paused, that we are forced to suspend the event until the circumstances are clarified. I apologize profusely. The whispers grew into a rumble of anxious voices. People turned to each other, perplexed and indignant. Some stood up about Toliv, others loudly demanded explanations. At that moment, Pauline ran out of Theodore of the mansion. Her face was contorted with panic. She was followed by Ebner looking confused and bewildered. They quickly approached Theodosia, and a tense conversation ensued between them that I couldn't hear over the distance and the noise. I could see Pauline waving her arms around Edner, trying to calm her down. Theodosia explaining something to both of them. Then Theodosia pointed my direction and their gazes. Pauline and Edner turned to me. I stood up so they could see me better. Our eyes met across a space filled with anxious guests. Pauline's face changed as she recognized me. Shock, disbelief, and then understanding and horror. Edner just looked puzzled, not yet fully realizing what was happening. Theodosia turned to the microphone again. Ladies and gentlemen, I have good news. The situation has been resolved. The new sponsor has agreed to take care of all the expenses for tonight's event. She paused dramatically. Minus Mr. Orson Hadley. The groom's father has generously offered to pay for his son's entire wedding. The guests murmured again, but now there was relief mixed with curiosity in their voices. Many turned to look at me. I stood motionless, feeling everyone's eyes turn in my direction. Pauline said something quickly to Ebner, then walked determinedly toward me across the rows of chairs. Her face was a mask of appolite smile, but her eyes burned with a mixture of fear and anger. Minus Mr. Hadley, she said, coming toward me. Make I speak to you alone. Of course, I answered, trying to keep my voice calm and confident. We stepped aside to a small gazebo lined with flowers. As soon as we were out of earshot of the guests, her smile faded. What are you doing? She hissed. Why are you making such a spectacle of yourself? I just wanted you to realize who you called a tramp. I answered flatly. The man who paid for your entire wedding. You were that anonymous donor. Her voice trembled. Yes, I paid for everything 3 weeks ago through Theodosia. I wanted to give my son a gift, even if he doesn't want to see me. Pauline turned pale. I didn't know, she said quietly. I swear, I didn't know. If Theodosia had told me, I asked her not to tell. I interrupted. I wanted it to be an anonymous gift. I didn't think you'd make me look like Abigail. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't realize the wedding was on you. I was just protecting our day with Edner from the unexpected. From his father, I clarified. From Emp's man, he never talks about. She parried, raising her gaze again. Edner told me that you were barely a part of his life, that you'd always prioritize work over being with your family. I've made mistakes, I admitted. A lot of mistakes, but I never stopped loving my son. Love is an action, Mr. Hadley. Presence, support, not in checks sent after 20 years of silence. Her words were painfully precise. I had indeed tried to make up for my absence with money, first offering to pay for Ebner's college, then trying to get him a car, now paying for the wedding. As if money could replace years of lost time. You're right, I said after a pause. Money can't fix the past. But it was the only thing I could offer. The only thing Ebner would probably accept from me. Pauline studied me with a look as if seeing me for the first time. Why did you come back? She asked. Why did you make that scene with the canceled payments? Because I was tired of being invisible. I answered honestly. Tired of my own son preferring to think I was dead rather than acknowledge our complicated I wanted him to see me, really see me. And for that, you were willing to ruin our wedding. There was a tone of disbelief in her voice. I wasn't going to ruin it, I countered. I offered a new payment right away. No one would have been hurt except maybe your pride. My pride. She grinned bitterly. You nearly caused a panic among 200 guests of your wounded pride, Mr. Hadley. Don't try to shift the blame. At that moment, Ebner came up to us. His face was tense, his eyes darting between Pelin and me. What's going on? Dad, did you paid for our wedding? Yes, I answered, looking him in the eye. I wanted to give you a gift, an anonymous gift, and then you decided to cancel it when you weren't allowed to go to the ceremony. There was disappointment in his voice, but not surprise. It was like he expected me to behave this way. Yeah, I was impulsive, I admitted. I shouldn't have reacted that way. No, you shouldn't have, Edner agreed. He turned to Pauline. Honey, can you give us a minute? I need to talk to my father alone. Pauline hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave us. Please, Edner added more gently. It's all right. I can handle it. She nodded, gave me one last uncertain look, and stepped away, leaving the two of us alone in the gazebo. We were silent for a while. I looked at my son, a grown man standing in front of me in his wedding suit, so much like me in my youth, and yet, so alien at the same time. Why? He finally asked. Why did you have to pay for the wedding? And then make such a spectacle of it? I wanted to give you a gift, I repeated. No strings attached. No expectations. Just to know you'd have the perfect wedding. And then, I found out that I was dead to you, I said quietly. That it was easier for you to think I was dead than to admit that I'd just been a bad father. Ear looked away. Pauline told you. Yeah, and it hurts, son. It hurts more than you can imagine. Hurt worse than missing birthdays. He asked bitterly. More painful than promises you never kept. More painful than knowing your father cared more about his company than his own family. Every word was like a knife stab. But I deserved them all. No, I admitted, it doesn't hurt more. I deserve to hurt too, Edner. I was a bad father, putting work before family, missed out on the important parts of your life. I understand why you turned your back on me. Then why did you show up today? He squeaked. Why ruin my day? I didn't want to ruin your day, I countered. I just wanted to see you happy, at least from afar, and that's why you almost ruined the ceremony. He sounded incredulous. He was wrong, I admitted. When Pauline called me kicked me out, something inside broke. I wanted you to realize who you were rejecting. A rich man instead of a poor man. Ebner grinned bitterly. You think that matters to me? Do you think I would have invited you if I knew you could pay for the whole wedding? No, I shook my head. I know you're not. That's why you wanted to give the gift anonymously so you wouldn't feel obligated. Edner stared at me for a long time, as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. I don't understand you, Dad, he said at last. I never did. You disappeared for years, then showed up with gifts and money, as if that would fix everything, and now this. What do you want from me? Nothing, I answered honestly. I don't expect you to forgive me or let me back into your life. I just wanted to see you on your wedding day to see that you're happy, that you're doing well, that you didn't make the same mistakes I did. Edner was quiet for a moment, considering my words. What now? He asked. Are y'all going to disappear again? For years, if that's what you want, I said. I want to impose. I've never wanted that. What do you want, Dad? There was something like genuine curiosity in his voice for the first time. What do you really want? I wondered. What did I want? Forgiveness. A reunion. A chance to make up for the past. I want to know, my son, I finally answered. The man you become, your dreams, your fears, your joys. I want to be a part of your life, even a small part, but only if you want me to. Edner looked at me for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to the guests waiting for the ceremony to begin. He looked at Pauline, who was watching us nervously from a distance. Today is not the time for such decisions, he said. I have a wedding, 200 guests waiting, and I'm still not sure this isn't another one of your manipulations. I understand, I nodded. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just let me stay for the ceremony. In the last row, out of sight. I just want to see my son get married. Edner hesitated, clearly torn between different feelings. All right, he said at last. You can stay, but no scenes, no drama. This is my day. And Pauline's, of course, I agreed hastily. I'll bet us greet, I promise. Edner nodded and turned to leave. Then he stopped and added without turning round. And Dad, thank you for paying for the wedding. It means a lot. He walked away, leaving him in the gazebo with a lump in my throat and a tight feeling in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but perhaps it was the first tiny step in the right direction. The ceremony ended, oddly enough, without incident. It in the last row, unnoticed by most of the guests, and watched my son recite a highest vows of love to the woman who had called me an hour before. Life eyes full of irony. Ebner looked happy, though I noticed how his gaze occasionally slid in my direction quickly, almost imperceptibly to those around him. Pauline, on the other hand, studiously avoided looking in my-direction, focusing on the ceremony and smiling for the photographer. After exchanging rings and officially declaring them husband and wife, the newlyweds walked down the center, Islato, the applause of the guests. As they passed me, Ebner nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that meant more to me than all the words in the world. The buffet was organized in a spacious tent, decorated with flowers and garlands. The tables were bursting with exquisite dishes, waiters were serving champagne, musicians were playing an unobtrusive melody. Everything was exactly as I had paid for. The perfect wedding. I kept to the side, sipping champagne and watching the festivities from afar. Few guests cast curious glances in my direction. Apparently, news of the payment drama had already spread, but no Ani approached. I was an outsider at this celebration of life, an uninvited guest there only by my son's grace. This is not how you envision this day, is it? It turned around and saw. Sabila, 22 years had hardly changed her. The same dark hair, now stirred with gray. The same attentive eyes. Hello, Sabila, I said. No, it isn't. But I'm glad I'm here at all. She nodded and stood beside me watching the dancing couples. Edner and Pauline were twirling around in the center of the tent, smiling at each other. They make a handsome couple, Sybil remarked. Yes, I agreed. Our son looks happy. He is happy, she confirmed. At least he was before you showed up, and made a scene. I sighed. Shakir, I'm not proud of my behavior, but you can understand being exposed as a beggar from your son's own wedding, which you paid for but weren't invited to. Chefinish for me. Yeah, I heard that story. The whole room is buzzing. I'm sorry if I ruined the day. It's not fun to tell you about regrets, Orson, Zeeble said quietly. We both have enough of them. We were silent for a moment, watching the dancers. It was strange to stand next to the woman I'd once loved, the woman I'd lived with for 15 years, and feel like almost strangers. Why did you come tonight? She asked at last, after all these years. Because it's my only son's wedding, I answered simply, numb. I had missed too many important days in his life. I couldn't miss this one, even knowing you weren't invited, that Ebner didn't want to see you. Even so, I nodded. I was hoping. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe a miracle, a chance, to at least talk to him. Sybil shook her head. You've always been an idealist, Orson, always believing that you could fix everything with one beautiful gesture. And you've always been a realist, I countered. Always seeing only what is, not what could be. Maybe that's why we didn't work, she said with a slight smile. Two different ways of looking at the world. At that moment, Ebner came up to us. He looked serious, even worried. Mom, Dad, Hesed, and it was strange to hear him call me Dad after all these years. I need to talk to both of you alone. We followed him into the small library in the main building. Edner closed the door and turned to us. I want to know the truth, he said without preamble. The whole truth about your divorce and what happened afterward. Sybil and I looked at each other. It was a conversation we had both avoided for 22 years. What exactly do you want to know? Sybil asked cautiously. Everything, Edner said firmly. Dad says he tried to keep in touch, that he came to my matches, sent gifts. Is that true? Sabila turned pale but nodded. Shum, she said quietly. It's true. Edner stared at her stunned. And you kept it from me. All these years I was trying to protect you. Sibyl's word, her voice trembling, from pain, from disappointment. Your father, he always put work first. I was afraid he would hurt you again. So you lied, Tom, Edner asked incredulously. Told me. He didn't call, didn't write, didn't come, intercepted his gifts. Yes, Sybil admitted. I did. Ear turned to me, his eyes a mixture of anger and pain. And you? Why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you come in person? Why didn't you insist on your right to see me? I tried, I answered. In the early years after the divorce, I hired a lawyer to push for more visitation rights. But all my attempts to see you were rebuffed. You didn't want to see me, so I was told. And when you got older and could make your own decisions, you believed I'd abandon you, that I didn't care. And yet you gave up, Edner said bitterly. Let it happen. I never gave up completely, I objected. I followed your life through mutual acquaintances, knew when you went to college, when you got your first job. I even tried to help financially, anonymously. But yeah, in a way I did give up, and that's my greatest mistake. Edner looked at both of us and there was such pain in his eyes that my heart squeezed. You both, he said quietly. Yabath robbed me of a normal childhood. You, Dad, by your absence and your obsession with work, and you, Mom, with your lies and manipulation. You both used me in your war against each other. Ebner, that's not true, Sybil began. Bud held up his hand, stopping her. Yes, it is. You used me as a weapon against my father, and you, Dad, used money as a substitute for a real relationship. You both thought you knew what was best for me, but neither of you asked me what he wanted. We were silent because there was nothing to say. He was right. We had both in our own way failed him. I want to know everything, Edner continued. Every detail, every lie, every attempt at communication. I have a right to know my own story. And so we told it. Sybil talked about her fear and bitterness after the divorce. About how she feared I would break Edner's heart, how I had broken hers. I talked about my attempts to be a part of my son's life, about attending matches, about gifts, about his progress through third hands, about how work was really my priority in the early years of marriage, and how I realized my mistake too late. Edner listened in silence, his face growing more and more tense. At that moment, the door opened and Pauline entered the library. She looked worried. Ebner, is everything all right? The guests are asking about you. Not now, Pauline, Ebner answered, without turning around. I have an important conversation with my parents. But honey, it's our wedding, she insisted, stepping closer. People are waiting. The DJ has already announced us twice for the next dance. Edner turned to her, and I could see the irritation on his face. I said, not now. This is more important. Pauline blinked, clearly not expecting a rebuff. More important than our wedding? She asked with a hint of resentment in her voice. Shiram, more important than the 200 guests who came to congratulate us. Yes, Edner said firmly. More important, I just found out that my whole life had been built on lies, but my parents kept the truth from me for 22 years. I think it's worth a few minutes of my time. Pauline looked at me, and in her eyes I saw of course, it was today, our wedding day. Couldn't it have waited a week, a month? Did we have to have family drama right now? Her words spoken with ill-concealed irritation made Edner frown. Pauline, he said in a warning tone, this is important to me. And me? She asked. Our wedding Augustus, aren't they important? I could see the emotions struggling on Edner's face. Love for his new wife, obligation to his guests. Shock at the secrets he just revealed. Give me another 10 minutes, he said at last. Then I'll go back to the guests. Pauline opened her mouth to object, but changed her mind. Instead, she turned to me. Minus Mr. Hadley, she said with strained politeness. I understand that you have important family matters to discuss. But today is our wedding day, a day that should be about me and Ebner, not about past grudges and family secrets. Couldn't it wait? I wanted to reply that 22 years of waiting was enough, but I held back. Instead, I looked at Ebner. It was his choice, not mine. Nama, Pauline's right, Sybil said suddenly. Today's your day. Orson and I aren't going anywhere. We can continue this conversation tomorrow, when everyone's calmer. Ebner shifted his gaze from Mito, his mother, then to Pauline. I could see him struggling with himself. Okay, he finally said, you're right. Now is not the time. He turned to me. Dad, will you stay until the end of the reception? If you want to, I said. I do. He nodded. We still have a lot to talk about tomorrow. I'll be waiting, I said. Pauline brightened, taking Edner's hand in hers. Good. Now, let's go. They're really waiting for us. They left Felibri, leaving me alone with Sabella. We were silent for a while, thinking about what had happened. Did you see her? Sybil finally asked when Edner said that talking to us was more important than the wedding. I did. He nodded. Pauline isn't used to things being more important than what she wants. She reminds me of you when you were younger, Sabella said with a touch of irony, just as determined, just as focused on her priorities. I wanted to object, but I realized she was right. Pauline did remind me of me in those years when work was more important than anything else. I hope Edner doesn't make the same mistakes I did, I said quietly. He's smarter than both of us, Sabel replied. He always had been. We left the library and went back to the reception. Edner and Pauline were dancing in the center of the room, smiling at the guests, but I noticed that my son's smile didn't reach his eyes. He was here body but not soul, immersed in thoughts of the mysteries he had just solved. Pauline, on the other hand, was radiant, completely given to the moment. She reveled in the attention, the admiring glances, the compliments. This was her day, her triumph, and she wasn't about to let Edner's family problems ruin it. I watched them and thought about how different they were. Edner thoughtful, deep, willing to postpone his own wedding for the sake of an important conversation. Pauline, bright, superficial, putting form over substance. They were like day and night, fire and ice. After a while, Pauline noticed my gaze and said something to Ebner. He nodded and they headed toward me, minus Mr. Hadley. Pauline began with a smile that didn't affect her eyes. I wanted to thank you again for your generosity. Without you, this wedding would not have been so perfect. I'm glad I was able to help, I replied, looking at my son. It's important to me that Ebner is happy. Oh, he's very happy, Pauline said quickly, squeezing her husband's hand. Isn't he, darling? Edner smiled weakly. Yes, of course he is. I could see that his thoughts were far away. Pauline noticed it too. An irritation flashed across her face. Ebner is so glad you were able to attend, she continued, though it was obvious she was speaking for herself and not her husband. Though of course, a warning would have been helpful. We could have prepared, put you on the program. Pauline. Edner interrupted her, a warning in his voice. She stopped talking, but I could see in her face that she wasn't happy. She wasn't, you said so, being interrupted. I used to Ebner contradicting her. Dad, Edner said, looking me in the eye. I want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I'm glad you're here today, and I'm glad we're finally having this conversation. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad too, son, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. More than you can imagine. Pauline shifted her gaze from me to Ebner, and I could see the worry growing in her eyes. She hadn't expected our reunion to be so sincere, that Edner would actually want to reconnect with me. Well, she said with a strange smile, I guess we should get back to the guests. The DJ announced that there will be a cake cutting. In 10 minutes, of course. Edner nodded. He looked at me again. We'll talk tomorrow about everything. I'll be waiting, I replied. They left and I stood there, staring after them. And I thought about how Pauline's true nature had become obvious too. Everyone in those few minutes, her concern was not for Ebner and his feelings, but for the smooth running of the wedding, about making sure everything went according to plan. That nothing disrupted the perfect picture. I didn't know if Ebner could see that, whether he realized he'd married a woman who cared more about form than substance, about the outside of life rather than what really mattered. But it was his choice, his life, and I was just a father returning after 22 years away. I had no right to judge or interfere. It was a week after the wedding. I waited for a call from Ebner, the very conversation he'd promised, but the phone was silent. I didn't rush things. I realized that my son and his new wife were probably on a wedding trip. Plus, he needed time to digest everything he'd learned on his wedding day. When 2 weeks and then a month went by without a word, I began to worry. Maybe Ebner had changed his mind. Maybe Pauline had convinced him it wasn't worth rehashing the past. Or worse, had Sybil interforadagen. Finally, unable to bear the suspense, I called Archibald. If any uncle'd know what was going on in Ebner's life, it was an old family friend. They got back from Italy 3 days ago, Archie informed me. Season Bertha had talked to Sibila. Looks like the honeymoon didn't go too smoothly. What happened? I asked, feeling my insides tighten with anxiety. Quarrels, Archie answered briefly. A little fights. Pauline wanted to spend time at fancy resorts and take pictures for social media. Edner preferred historical sites and museums. Classic conflict, of interest, and they're just now noticing it. I wondered, how can you live together for years and not realize how different you are? You'd be surprised, Archie chuckled. People see what they want to see, especially when they are in love. I remembered myself and Sybil Ath, beginning of our relationship, how we'd overlooked the fundamental differences in our values and priorities, blinded by passion and mutual attraction. How those differences then slowly eroded our marriage, undermining it from the inside out. Do you think I should call Ebner? I asked after a pause. Give him time, Archie. He's dealing with his marriage, with his relationship with his mother, with his own feelings. He needs space. I followed my friend's advice and didn't call. Instead, I sent a quick text saying, I'm here when you're ready. Talk. Succinct, number, pressure. Just a reminder that I was waiting. The reply didn't come until 3 days later. We can meet on Saturday. Riverbend Cafe, 14 o'clock. On the appointed day, I arrived early, chose a table in the corner, and ordered coffee. I was as nervous as a teenager bear, a first date. Funny. I, a 65-year-old man who'd built a successful business, gone through a divorce and 22 years of loneliness, was afraid to talk to my own son. Ebner showed up exactly at the appointed time. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes, the tense line of his mouth, the slouching shoulders, not a happy newlywed returning from a paradise vacation. Dad? He nodded, sitting down across from me. Enter, I said. It's good to see you. He ordered an espresso and was silent for a while, gathering his thoughts. I didn't rush him, letting him start talking when he was ready. I talked to my mom, he finally said. A long talk. She confirmed everything you said at the wedding. It was about the gifts, about going to the matches, about dottering to get in touch. I nodded, not knowing what to say. She honestlift, she was protecting me. Edner continued. From pain, from disappointment, from your fickless shuas, afraid that you would come into my life and then disappear again, immersed in your work. I understand her fears, Esad, but she had no right to make that decision for you, to deprive you of your father, however imperfect he might be. I agree, Edner nodded. I told her the same thing. We have a complicated drelephans right now. I can't just forget 22 years of lies. Don't jump to conclusions, I advised. Sybil loves you. Everything she did, even if it was wrong, was motivated by love and care. Edner looked at me in surprise. You're protecting her after everything she's done. I'm trying to be fair, I replied. Yes, what she did was wrong, but I wasn't a perfect father either. I did work too much, miss at important events in your life, put business before family. I gave her reasons not to trust me. Edner twirled cup thoughtfully in his hands. You know what the most frustrating thing is? That you both decided for me. Deciding that I was better off not seeing my father. That it was better to think you were dead, to have a complicated drelephans. No one asked me what I wanted. I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. He was right. What about Pauline? I asked, changing the subject. How was the honeymoon? Ebner's face changed instantly. His lips tight, his eyes strained. Not so good, he said briefly. It turned out that we had different ideas about the perfect vacation and a lot of other things. It's normal, I said carefully. All couples go through an adjustment period, getting used to it. It's not just that. Edner shook his head. Pauline, she's different when we're alone. Not the way I knew her before we were married. More demanding, more cold. You remembered Pauline on the wedding day. Her irritation when Ebner chose family conversation over dancing and entertainment. Her ostentatious politeness and fake smile. But I kept silent. It's not for me to interfere. In my son's relationship with his wife, she's angry about our conversation. Edner continued. She says you're manipulating me, trying to bring discord into our family. That your showing up at the wedding was a selfish act that ruined our day. What do you think? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Edner looked me in the eye. I think we've all made mistakes. You, Mom, myself, even Pauline. But I also think everyone should have a chance to get better, including you. Those words warmed my heart. For the first time in 22 years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, I said quietly. It means a lot to me. We talked for another hour or so. Edner talked about his work in cybersecurity, about his future plans, about the house he and Pauline had bought in this. I talked about my company and how I'm slowly stepping away from the business, handing over management to the younger generation. When it was time to say goodbye, we exchanged phone numbers and agreed to call each other regularly. Not too often, once every week or two, so as not to put pressure on Ebner and give him space to deal with his own life. One more thing, Dad, he said before he left. I want you to know that I don't hold a grudge against you. Yes, you've made mistakes, but I realize you've always tried to do what you thought was right. Thank you, son, I said, fighting the lump in my throat. That's more than I deserve. We hugged awkwardly, the first hug in 22 years, and Edner left, and I was left sitting in the cafe overwhelmed with complicated emotions. For the next few weeks, we heckled each other regularly. Nothing deep, just short conversations about everyday things, about work, about theater. Slowly, step by step, we were getting to know each other anew, relearning how to be father and son. But the more we talked, the more I noticed the anxious note in Edner's voice when it came to Pauline. He never complained directly, but in the little things, in the reservations, in the pauses, I sensed that their marriage was cracking at the seams. And then, about 2 months after we met at the cafe, I got a text from Ebner. Pauline and I are breaking up. Can you come over? I called him immediately. My son's voice sounded tired but calm. Sukran, what's wrong? I asked. I found her correspondence. He answered briefly, with a friend. She wrote about me unpleasant things about me. That she only married me for miminy. That I'm a loser in bed. That she was grateful to you for paying for thooting. Otherwise, she would have had to save money. I didn't know what to say. I get it, Dad, Edner continued. You were right about her from the beginning. She really only cared about the outside of things. About reputation, about status, about money, not about me. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. I'm really sorry. You know what the funny thing is? There was a bitter irony in Edner's voice. Mom was right, too. She'd said from the beginning that Payne wasn't the right girl for me. That she was too superficial, too concerned with the trappings of success, and I didn't listen. I thought Mom was just jealous. Sybil was always perceptive. I remarked, yes, she was right about that. I arrived at Edner's house that evening. His house, a large, modern, upscale suburb, looked immaculate on the outside, but the inside was chaotic. Things strewn about, open suitcases, an overturned vase. Pauline was here, Ebner explained, seeing my gaze, picking up her things. We had a fight. Really Shethriton to destroy me. Ebner smiled tiredly. Tell everyone what I was really like. Ruin my reputation. Ruin me through the courts. The usual threats. Ophe jolted woman. What are you going to do? I asked, walking into the living room. Nothing, Edner shrugged. We have a good prenup. She'll get what's due. Nothing more, nothing less. And her threats. He waved his hand. They're nothing. I looked at my son carefully. Despite his fatigue and stress, he looked free, like he'd taken a heavy weight off his shoulders. You don't seem particularly upset, I said. It's weird, isn't it? Edner smiled weakly. I should be heartbroken, but I feel mostly relieved. I guess deep down, I always knew that Pauline wasn't the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. How many years had I refused to admit that my marriage to Sibylla was falling apart, that our values and priorities were too different, that we were both unhappy. What about Sibylla? I asked. Have you talked to her about the divorce? Yes, Edner nodded. She was very reserved. She didn't gloat. She didn't say, I told you so. She just said she'd support whatever decision I made. That's good, or I said. So, she's changed, too. She's wiser. We've all changed, Edner said thoughtfully. You, me, Mom, even Pauline. She's changed since the wedding, too. Colder, more demanding, angrier, or maybe she just stopped pretending. People rarely change for divorce, I said. More often, they just stop hiding who they really are. Wedded into the night about the past and the future, about hopes and disappointments, about how to build without repeating the mistakes of the past. It was the conversation we'd been missing for 22 years. The next day, just as I was about to leave, a sports car pulled into the driveway in front of Edner's house. Pauline jumped out of it, disheveled, tear-stained eyes, not at all like the cold beauty I'd seen at the wedding. Enter, she shouted when she saw us both on the porch. You can't do this to me. Not after everything we've been through, Pauline. We've already talked it over, Edner said tiredly. Please, go away. No, she ran closer. You can't throw me out of your life like I'm nothing. I'm your wife. Ex-wife, Edner corrected. The divorce papers have already been filed. Pauline looked at me, her eyes narrowed with rage. It's Sue, she hissed. You ruined everything. You turned him against me. You ruined our wedding, and now you've ruined our marriage. Pauline Edner stepped forward. My father had nothing to do with this. It's my choice, and it's based on your actions, not his words. Liar, she shouted. You've always been a weakling. You've always succumbed to other people's influence. First, your mother controlled you. Now your father. I saw how those words hurt Ebner, how he flinched at every insult, and something inside me broke. For 22 years, I hadn't been there for my son. Hadn't protected him, but now I could do it. Pauline, I said quietly, but with such inner strength that she stopped talking and turned toward me. I understand your pain and anger, but if you continue to insult my son, If you try to tarnish his reputation or hurt him in any way, I will use every resource I have, and there are many, to protect him. Every word you say, every message, every threat you make will be documented and used against you. You'll lose not only your money, but your reputation." Pauline went pale. Fear flashed in her eyes, real genuine fear. "You can't." "Yeah, wouldn't dare." "Try and find out," I replied. "Now, please leave." Calmly and with dignity. "It's the best way out for everyone." She looked at me for a long moment, then shifted her gaze to Ebner. Something in her face had changed. Something of anger replaced by bitterness, rage by fatigue. "Both of you," she began, but her voice trailed off. She shook her head, turned, and walked quickly away to her car. As she drove away, Edner turned to me. "Ah, thank you," he said quietly, "for taking my side." "I'm your father," I replied simply, as late as it sounded. We stood on the porch, watching Pauline's car drive away, and I thought about how strange everything had turned out. A month ago, I'd been a stranger at my Anson's wedding, an uninvited guest who'd been made to look like it today. I stood by his side, defending him against unfair accusations. "What now?" Edner asked. "What will happen to us? You, me, Mom?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I think we all need space and time. Old grudges are too deep to disappear overnight, but we can try to build something new, something better." "I'd like that," Edner nodded. I'd like that very much. We hugged this time without awkwardness, for real. Then I got into the car and drove away, feeling both bitter and relieved. Bitterness, at lost years, at the mistakes that can't be undone, and release from the weight of guilt and regret I had carried for 22 years. I didn't know what lay ahead. Would Edner and I be able to build a true father-son relationship? Would he be able to forgive Sabila for her years of lies? Would he recover from the collapse of his marriage? But I was sure of one thing. I would no longer be part of this toxic family dynamic where lies and manipulation were the norm. I will be honest with my son, even if that honesty hurts, and I will be there for him when he needs me. Maybe that's the most important lesson I've learned over the years. True love isn't about loud gestures or expensive gifts. It's about being there for each other. Just being there.